Hello and welcome to Bespoke Unit. I'm CP and in this video I'm reviewing Bailey's Irish Cream. Created in 1971 by the legendary Tom Jago with David Gluckman and Hugh Seymour-Davies, it was released in 1974 by Gilbeys of Ireland. Today it is owned by Diageo and is produced in either Dublin, Ireland or Mallusk in Northern Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom. It is produced by an assortment of Irish whiskies, almost like a blend, but then are combined with cream and cocoa and homogenized and emulsified using vegetable oil so that they don't separate during transit or during storage. Indeed, thanks to the alcohol content as well, a bottle of Bailey's should last 24 months whether it's been opened or unopened, as long as it's in temperatures of between 0 to 25 degrees Celsius. As mentioned, the base for this is Irish whiskey. There's about 70%. There's also probably a bit of grain spirit just to give it a little kick. There's no age statement. There's no casking. We don't know how long these Irish whiskies had been stored. Now we'll jump into the actual review, and as you can see here, it is luscious, it is creamy, and I admit I have quite a soft spot for Bailey's Irish Cream. The hue is reminiscent of a latte coffee or even just milk and coffee, but it has a thickness that is much more syrupy. Its clarity, well, there is no clarity, it's completely opaque. It leaves a very sticky residue just about everywhere, so if I was to do a test like this, it's going to get quite gooey. Yeah, it's pretty gooey. It's not that bad actually. It's almost like using a nice moisturizer. My skin feels hydrated and boozy. In terms of depth, well, you're going to be there. The depth is there. I mean, I don't know why I'm reviewing it in such a formal way, but we want to follow the same process for every spirit that we cover. As for the nose, so in terms of nose feel, it's very unctuous. You're going to get hints of cocoa, some condensed milk, and maybe a little bit of hazelnut as well, touch of coffee, things like that. The bouquet is not overly rich. On the nose, it does feel a little bit synthetic. It's not quite intense. There is a diversity of notes, but the complexity isn't quite there. Now onto the palate. Now the problem is with me and Bailey's Irish Cream, it's very moreish. You just keep reaching for more. So it's basically having like a chocolate milkshake with lots of booze in it. The primary flavour is very sweet. The mouthfeel is exceedingly creamy. In the opening, it's going to deliver chocolate, hazelnut, and some milk. It's a lot less synthetic on the palate compared to on the nose. In the heart, you're going to get some almond, perhaps just a hint of cereal, which basically is a precursor to the booziness, and some milk chocolate. So the chocolate and milk from the opening have really combined to be a much more discernible milk chocolate accord. And then the finish, there's a hint of vanilla, a whiff of coffee, but then you really do get the booziness and it gives you a little kick in the throat as it comes down. But that being said, the whiskey is very subtle. It's not overbearing whatsoever. And the entire idea behind creating Bailey's Irish Cream by Tom Jago was that it would be a much more palatable and less punishing Irish cream. In terms of complexity, there isn't any there. It's not made to be complex and made for easy drinking, but there is some nuance in the different notes. You do get hints of a couple of spices and herbs and maybe some nuts as well. The texture is very smooth. It just gloops its way and slowly makes its way down the throat and warms you up. This is just the sort of thing you want to drink while next to a roaring fire with a good book. A lot of people have it with ice, but I personally just enjoy it neat or even with a coffee, but we'll get to that in a second. In terms of maturity, you can't really taste the maturity of any of the whiskies in there. As I said, you don't know how long they've been stored. And then in terms of flavour, there's the floral hint of Irish whiskey, but outside of that, it's very subtle, very mild. In terms of depth, the depth of flavour isn't huge. It is a very harmonious flavour though. Of course, it leans forward at the front of the palate in terms of the sweetness, but the different flavors that are there knit together very nicely to produce very pleasant accords. It does linger for a little bit on the palate, but you're always reaching for more. So I imagine that the finish isn't quite as long as we would believe. And then finally, the versatility. This is a drink that can be used numerous different ways and in different pairings and cocktails, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But first I want to talk about the experience, and that is looking at the overall presentation. So the distinctive logo is quite pleasant. You have this nice Irish pasture, and the name, I believe the name Bailey's comes from a restaurant, and then the signature that we have underneath here is actually from Bailey's Hotel in London. But they don't actually have an apostrophe, whereas the London Hotel does. Packaging, there is none. In terms of the screw cap, it's just a simple metal screw cap. Sometimes I wonder if this won't actually stick if you leave it for too long. I guess time will tell. And next, when it comes to the occasion, this is a surprisingly versatile drink that can be enjoyed casually and for easy drinking at home, but don't be surprised to see it at more formal events as well, as it is still quite enjoyed. That being said, there are going to be some Irish creams that are perhaps more premium than this, but it is one of the most, if not the most, popular brand of Irish cream. Moving on finally to the value. So for me, this was 15 euros in buying it in France, but typically you're going to look at about $30 if you buy it in the USA. And finally, cocktails and pairings, and this is a couple of suggestions. It's not reviewed, not part of the score, it's just a thought exercise at the bottom right hand corner. First of all, the ultimate cocktail for me is barely a cocktail, it's just a mixer. It's essentially an Irish coffee, except you're not adding the whiskey and the cream separately, you're just using this. It makes the process a lot simpler. And in fact, that's quite interesting because Tom Jago was the mastermind behind Malibu rum. And the idea behind that was to make the confectioning of a pina colada much easier. And I wouldn't be surprised if the idea behind this as well was to make the approach of making an Irish coffee much easier. But then again, Irish creams have been around for a lot longer than that. So as I said, Bailey's and coffee is a wonderful accord. The gourmand notes of the coffee contrast nicely against the sweetness of the cream, and it offers you a very pleasant and warming experience. On a similar note, I've noticed a couple of cocktails that are quite interesting. For example, a tiramisu cocktail where you'd be adding some mascarpone in there as well, and that would just add an extra level of flavor and calories. But as somebody who absolutely loves tiramisus, or tiramisu, that would be something that would be quite pleasant indeed. Alternatively, you could also go for a chocolate milkshake. So basically, make yourself a milkshake and add a dollop of Bailey's Irish cream in there. And a grappa cocktail. This is something I was thinking that could be quite interesting, as grappa also shares a strong relationship with coffee. It's often added to coffee as an amazaccafe. You can do a similar thing with Bailey's, where you would add perhaps a little bit of extra grappa to a Bailey's and coffee to give it that extra punch. And then finally, you could go for something called a mudslide, which is basically a play on a similar theme, which is where you'd be combining Bailey's Irish cream, some vodka, heavy cream, and a coffee liqueur. So for example, a Flor de Cana espresso, which is one of our favorites. Then when it comes to pairings, Bailey's is actually a great ingredient to use in cooking desserts. So you could either have it as an accompaniment, or you could include it into the recipe itself. For instance, in a cheesecake, in the topping, it adds an extra level of depth. There's going to be the chocolatiness and maybe an element of booziness, which some people would find very pleasant, or you could drink it alongside. Similarly, a banoffee pie. In that case, I'd probably add it to the condensed milk, or maybe even into the base for extra flavor. And of course, a chocolate fondant. So you can have it as part of the pastry itself, and you'd have some Bailey's Irish cream mixed with the chocolate in the center that is that's melted and hot, or you could use it for a syrup that you put over it, or again, you could drink it separately and enjoy the combination of the two. We at Bespoke Unit love cigars, so it's no surprise that we've considered a couple of different cigar pairings. And the first one that I would suggest is the Oliva Serie V Melanio Maduro. A Maduro flavored cigar is normally packed with gourmand flavors. Of course, you don't want to choose something that will overpower the Baileys, as it's actually quite mild in terms of flavor and doesn't have a lot of body. The whiskey is quite faint. You're only looking at 17% ABV. The Melanio Maduro is quite mild as Maduros go. Indeed, it's often a misconception. The Maduro needs to be strong, but Maduro just means aged. So the cigar tends to bring about more aged, mature, and complex flavors. In this case, it's going to have notes of gourmand. There's going to be notes of chocolate, some nuts, some spices that pair well as well. Otherwise, you could consider a variety of different Habano style cigars. And I'm not saying Cuban, I mean those that have been using Cuban seeds and that are sun-grown. For example, the Nub Habano is a nice affordable cigar that is quite short as well, so that would pair well with this if you just want something a little bit milder. Overall, like I said, I have quite an affinity for Bailey's Irish Cream. It is a beverage that I really enjoy, but I don't have it that often. The problem is that it's kind of dangerous for me. If I start, I won't stop and I'll drink the whole bottle. It's that moreish. It's so pleasant, but it's not going to be a very highbrow, complex experience either. If you're looking for something affordable, if you're looking for something that gives you some sweetness and some comfort during the winter seasons, this is a highly recommended beverage that I suggest that you keep in your drinks cabinet and consider experimenting for different cocktails. That's all from me today. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, give us a like, give us a subscribe, and leave a comment if you have any questions about Baileys or if you want to share your own experiences and opinions on the beverage. Until our next video, why don't you head to bespokeunit.com/spirits to see the resources that we have on liquor. We also have bespokeunit.com/wine, which currently covers a variety of different fortified wines, such as sherry, port, and Cankina, which is the lesser known one. Otherwise, you can head to bespokeunit.com and see all the other lifestyle subjects that we cover. I'm sure that there will be something that you will love.